Welcome to Sparring Sessions, a show that has taken many forms over the years, but to my knowledge is one of the first debate shows that was in the space. It started 100 years ago with myself and Emma Challenge talking about Conor McGregor. Matthew Wells and I debated whether or not GSP and Anderson Silva should be made. Craig Allen and I have had many tussles over many things, but it's time for the next chapter of Sparring Sessions, and it will be the biggest chapter yet. Myself and Fred Kirby will kick it off. Listen, who you may get in addition to some of the guys from Loudmouth Podcast could be some of the best and brightest for Round MMA, but we start with a doozy. 3 great topics to debate and a man who stays swinging for the fences, whether it's Keyboard Warriors or the Not Safe for Work podcast. You can be sure that the co-host of the first episode of Loudmouth MMA of the long-form show will always keep it a buck. He's the Stuart Scott of Loudmouth MMA. He's Fred Kirby. Fred, what's up?
Hey, now that's an introduction I can get behind. Mr. John Franklin.
It's a long time coming.
Listen, considering the times we're in, I'm doing fantastic, man. How are you doing during these uncertain times of ours?
Let me tell you something funny. I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, you can judge how well your life's going by the number of Tiger King episodes you've watched. If you've watched more than one, you're probably doing it. You got first world problems. If you've watched less than one, you got other shit you need to worry about. So I watched the whole damn series. So that should tell you where I'm at.
Listen, I have not watched it yet, and I refuse to. I'm not getting behind it. I'm not supporting this nonsense. I've seen the memes. I get the drift. I will not watch that. I'm done.
I can appreciate that. All right, Fred. So initially, this show will contain 3 rounds, 5 minutes for each round. However, in the coming weeks and months, we may expand it to championship rounds. Who knows? Each round will debate from a different time, the past, the present, and the future. So let's get it started. Fred, if anything can be said about you and I, it's that we don't pussyfoot around anything. We stay ready. We don't get ready. So let's come out guns blazing in round 1 with an easy question with a very complicated answer. Who's the greatest fighter of all time?
Okay, are you going to let me go first?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, we had no preamble, so I don't know who you're picking. So if you're picking this guy, I'm sorry. I assume you probably won't because especially with the news that he's in right now, I'm sure not a lot of people are picking him. And I don't give a damn what nobody says. The greatest fighter of all time, no doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, has to be Jon Jones. Now, I know he's in some hot water. We're going to get into that a little later, what he did, what we think about that means for talking about the absolute best fighters of all time. The best fighter that we've ever seen do it, it has got to be Jon Jones. There's really no equal. The only man that you could even possibly put in that realm, and I can already see some of y'all out there trying to do it, bringing up Khabib Nurmagomedov. Look at that. I even know his last name.
Look at you.
He's the only other guy who's on the top level who's undefeated. But I'm not even going to go into the strength of competition and the difference and such. I couldn't name Khabib's first 20 opponents. Jon Jones has been annihilating champions for a month of Sundays. For all of me, the greatest fighter, whether you like it or not, whether he rubs you the wrong way with the whole Christian thing and all he does in his outside the cage antics, the greatest fighter of all time, Jon Jones.
All right, so I actually wrote an article about this a couple years ago. I believe it was for Combat Press or MMA Today. I put a bunch of different criteria in it. So this boils down to 4 guys. It boils down to Demetrius Johnson, George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, and Jon Jones. That's your list. I mean, you can make a case for Khabib. I feel like it's a little early. We'll see what happens with Tony. We'll see what happens, with some. I mean, that division's so loaded that he's got to go through them all for me to really put him that way. Now, the argument against Jon Jones, which I'll make here, is he does have strength of schedule. He does have some questions in his USADA file. He does have some problems outside the cage. He hasn't always been a draw. And recently, he hasn't been as impressive with basically bulked up middleweights. So that's the argument against him. I will go with GSP because of – now, here's the argument against GSP. Well, I'm ready for you. The argument for GSP is that he's lost a couple of times and he was a decision machine. So you could say Demetrius Johnson, who's probably been the most oppressive of everybody, but he had the weakest division. So I'm going to go with GSP. I think he drew the most. I think he was the most popular. He brought it all together, fought the best, beat them all. GSP. Have at it.
Listen, you alluded to the fact, A, he's got a couple losses, and he was definitely in some boring fights. You can argue that he lost that Johnny Hendricks fight on the way out the door, but I'm going to tell you something. I'm going straight for the juggler here, and I don't give a damn who doesn't like it. I think he was cheating.
Uh-oh.
That's right. A, I think he was slicker than Snell Snot in that second BJ Penn fight. I think he was greased up for sure. He invented the grease trick. And B, I think he was on super good steroids that they just didn't catch him. A body like that, you've heard Uncle Chell. It's the 4-pack rule. He had like 32 packs on his stomach. He was built like a Greek god. I don't buy it. I think he was cheating the whole time. He was just the best at cheating. Jon Jones is, what are you going to do?
Here's the thing I admire about you, Fred. Instead of poking holes in my Jon Jones has USADA problems, you went ahead and said, listen, you went with the Nate Diaz thing of everybody's on steroids and John's the best. So that's what I appreciate about the argument. So yeah.
Listen, if you had picked anybody other than GSP, I probably wouldn't have done that. But GSP is the one, man. He's the one that I can't stand letting people get that one where they say GSP is the GOAT. And then he comes back against a one-eyed Bisping at 85. How dare you? He pulled the classic Couture. He came back. He saw the division got extremely thin. Bisping got lucky and got the belt. No, George comes back for that one, but then dips out when somebody else wants it. I'll have none of it.
I love the anti-George take. It's so rare that I'm actually glad I picked George St. Pierre just to hear the anti-George contingent. Listen, you can make a lot of cases for Jon Jones. I did this thing for Craig Allen on Fight Night Picks where I went around and did some work about Lyoto Machida and Jon Jones in his day, man, on his run. Listen, I will give you credit for the argument in this one thing. You quoted Uncle Chael, now I'll quote him. He said, Jon Jones is the only guy that has an off night and still walks away with a belt. It's hard to argue with that. All right, let's move on to round 2. Let's talk about the present. Fred, the biggest story at present in MMA is the fate of UFC 249, Khabib versus Tony. We pretty much know what it is now. Dana White is talking to everybody except for Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny about why the fight should happen and how everyone who has a problem with it is soft and just trying to ruin his plans and whatever. So for round 2, it's kind of a twofold question. Number one, tell me, do you think Dana is looking out for fighters in the sense that he's trying to ensure they're compensated, he's trying to keep the business moving and keep the fans entertained? Like, is he like the fairy godmother in all this? Or is he just putting fighters at undue risk because he knows that the demand outweighs the supply and he's just being opportunistic?
I would argue both. I would argue that he's trying to do the right thing by keeping them busy, by keeping his company going, by giving the fans what we are all dying for, something to keep us entertained during this time. But in trying to force that, yeah, man, he's putting them all at danger. It's a worldwide pandemic. Usually, I'm a big fan of Uncle Dana, and when everybody else doesn't really see his side, I kind of get it. Listen, he's been steering this ship for a long time. I tend to side with him. But in this particular regard, listen, I gave up on Tony Khabib a month of Sundays ago. Like, when they shut down the NBA regular season, I'm like, oh, well, this is a serious sort of deal, Jack. Like, I knew when we got UFC Brasilia, that was going to be all she wrote for the and then it just progressively kind of got worse and worse as far as world news with the COVID virus goes. So I gave up on Tony Khabib a long time ago. I don't give a damn what Dana's been saying to the media. Like, it's not going to happen. At this point, I'm starting to slightly worry about DW's mental health because, I mean, bro, just go ahead and give up the ghost. Like, we all know it's not happening. We're not even going to be mad at you for saying it's not happening. How long have you I hate to shoot another question at you, but, like, how long have you really thought that Tony Khabib would actually happen? Like, when did you actually give up hope on that fight?
Early. I was with you. I was like, I didn't see the logistics of it. I heard what he was saying, but I didn't see, like, okay, Dana, I know that you can move mountains. And there was a minute when I thought the Apex thing could happen because that's their own building. That's like, I thought they could have a little more control over that than maybe whatever. They bring in some sanctioning bodies. They do a skeleton crew, if you will. But once the athletic commission started shutting stuff like the Apex down and like the performance centers and all that stuff, I was like, all right, it's not going to happen. But now the larger question here, though, I think is I'm not going to get political on this, but I think you'll kind of get the undertones of it, is that a guy like Dana White has such a huge ego, rightfully so. And, I tell people this all the time. If you work with a guy and that guy has a huge ego, right? He's just your coworker. And he has a huge ego. This guy is the guy that runs the UFC. So if you can almost understand, if you're like, Billy at work's got a really big ego. Well, he's just Billy at work. This is Dana that took a company that was about to go under and completely resurrected it and was the reason why it was sold for $4 billion. Of course he's going to think that he took a $2 million company and sold it for $4 billion. You telling me he doesn't think he can put a fight together? Like, that's probably small potatoes to him. So for me, I think that he needs to maybe step away from it a little bit. I think I'm with you, man. I don't want to be with you because I like to go at it a little bit more, but I'm with you in the sense that I do think that if he feels like he can look out for his fighters, put on a good show, make some money while also being incredibly opportunistic, that's what got him where he is. So seeing and making things happen that others can't is what put him in the place where he got. Now, here's the other question. How is it that the media, and I'm going to call names here, man, Brett Okamoto, every chance he gets says, well, the idiots on Twitter stop calling for this fight. The guy that you interview all the time, who you're best buds with, is calling for this fight. Why are the guys on Twitter idiots and Dana's a visionary? Like, either be even-handed with it or don't say anything at all. How does Dana get a pass on this?
Well, listen, because especially for guys like Brett Okamoto, like that's his, that's the guy. He has to do what Dana White says. You know what I mean? Like that's the problem with being with any sort of like big media outlet or source like that, is you got to kind of play their game, or DW flat never talk to you again. Dana White is usually good with the media, though. Like, he usually comes out smelling good. This is one of those strange situations where he's just fighting an obvious losing battle. So, like, but I ain't hating on, like, Ariel Helwani. Like, everybody hates on dude. Luke Thomas is kind of, they got their famous little feud. Luke kind of took the indie route and Ariel took the ESPN route. And I enjoyed both of them. I get it. Like, I'm more of a Luke guy. I'm more of an indie guy. I like going and watching the grunge band as opposed to the Britney Spearses or what have you. But I get it. Once you're there and you're on those platforms, if you ever want to talk to, listen, Ariel learned that the hard way, Jack. He got cute about 3 or 4 years ago, and they flat put him off the team. It took him forever to get back on. If his numbers weren't so huge outside, he probably still wouldn't be back. Brett Okamoto don't want that smoke. So those guys know, Dana White's kind of like the Godfather, bro. You better be cool, or you won't never be watching the UFC again after this little debacle.
It's true, because part of me wishes, like, there's been a few times when Dana's been, like, dug his heels in and been wrong, and he's kind of one of those guys that's smart enough to say, you know what, let me start posting some pictures of my kids on Instagram, step away for a second, and maybe this will all be forgotten. Like, stuff like Floyd fighting Ronda, women even being in the UFC, the flyweight division. He'll just stop talking about it, and usually the problem goes away. This time he's just dug his heels in way too deep, and I think that, and I've heard you talk about this before, the cards when we get back are going to be so great. Like, just wait for them. You know what I mean? Like, I really think that's what he should do. He can cash some really big checks when we get back if he just doesn't alienate the audience. You don't want to be the guy that comes down on the wrong side of history of a pandemic. Like, you try to make this fight happen, and then Tony and Khabib both get coronavirus. It's like, man, this fight you wanted so desperately, now this is the outcome.
And at this point, you're literally doing the fight a disservice. Neither one of them could possibly be ready. Khabib's already said he's like 20 pounds overweight, and of course he is. I mean, listen, not to keep harping on this COVID virus, but it's a serious, big thing. The whole world is panicking because of this. Trying to hold a fight during this time is just goofy. Look, I see how the WWE can do it. And that's why I don't watch the WWE no more. And that's why I watch, not to be rude, but real fighting. But in order to do this thing for real, we need real training camps. Guys got to really cut weight. They're going to really get hurt. They're going to really need to go to the hospital, man. You can't do this during a worldwide pandemic. As much as we would all love to see it, you just can't.
I just think he's just setting himself up for something weird, And again, I don't wish anything ill on Dana in the least bit. But, like, what if he got coronavirus through all this? Like, how do you look like the guy that's pushing through this, and then you end up with it, and it's like, dude, come on. Like, there's just so much of a downside to it. The upside is you're going to give us something we're going to get anyway. Why rush it? It's like trying to give me my Christmas presents on Thanksgiving because you just want to give them to me. Dude, Christmas is in December. Let's just wait.
Bro, and especially, and here's the thing. Here's an interesting take. Here's a bit of a hot take on the Tony Khabib fight. I don't think that fight is as big as everybody thinks. For us hardcore fans, it is for sure. But for, the guy who doesn't really watch fights like that and who casually, the Conor McGregor fans, so to speak, or the Nate Diaz fans, I don't think there are tons of them bummed out because they're not getting this fight for the 5th or 6th time. Outside of my MMA bubble, nobody cares about Khabib Tony, just to keep it a buck. Like, if it's not Conor or Nate, maybe like Stipe DC or Jon Jones, like Khabib like is a star in our world, but not in the grand scheme of things. So if we've been waiting for 5 years for this fight, us, the hardcore fans, will be fine for another couple months, man.
Fred, I'm going to end on a little bit of an Eddie Bravo moment here. Here's the Eddie Bravo moment. What if Dana's doing all this shit just so more people know about the fight? Like, what if he's doing all this just so, like, he has no plans of booking the fight, but he's doing all this just to raise the profile of the fight that couldn't even get made through Corona, so that when it's time to make it, all these people that you think don't know about it. I mean, listen, that's some next level meta smart shit on Dana's part, but I wouldn't put it past him. If he's going through all this rigmarole just to raise the profile of the fight when there's no other sports going on, that's kind of genius.
In a strange way, it would make more sense to me than for him to just keep beating this dead horse that, like, everybody in the world's kind of like, brah. Like,
it almost, yeah, it makes more sense that he's doing it to raise the if you think about it, yeah.
Well, right, because at this point, it's like everybody knows the fight can't happen, dude. Khabib's back in Russia. Like, everybody's on different sides of the planet. Like, this is not happening April 18th for sure. So I hope he's got some sort of other angle.
All right, let's move on to round 3 of the future. We talked about this person earlier. Fred, we end with Jon Jones, and whether this very well may be the end for Jon Jones in discussing his track record. His most recent legal trouble is almost 5 years to the day of his most famous legal trouble, which was the hit and run with the pregnant woman. So question 3 is 5 years from now, how will we look at this incident? Will we look at it like we look at that hit and run as just a blip on the radar, or could this be the beginning of the end?
I mean, I suppose throwing that last twist, saying, could this be the beginning of the end, depends on what happens next. And I guess that's a lot of this story. This particular incident, I think for me, is just a blip on the radar as far as Jon Jones goes. I mean, listen, the incident that you're speaking about that happened 5 years ago, he hit a pregnant lady, broke her arm, fled the scene, came back and got a bowl of weed and some loot, and then left again. And I mean, he lived to tell the tale after that one. So one would think during a worldwide pandemic, if he's just having a little taste of Jorge Masvidal's tequila, popping off a few rounds in the air and talking to the homeless people, he'll shake this one off for sure. Look, all jokes aside, he's got a couple things going for him here in all the right ways. A, with the UFC, I heard people saying stripping. Shut up now. Again, allude to what we were just talking about. There ain't going to be no fights for a while. So he kind of dodged a bullet there. It ain't like they're going to need the belt. The belt ain't going to be getting defended for a month of Sundays anyways. So John's good. And B, with the actual law. Again, it's crazy times. They're actually letting people out of jail. They let Tekashi 6ix9ine out of prison early, for Christ's sakes. I mean, listen, if you got so much as a wispy cough, they're pushing you out. If you ain't, like, murdering people, they're not letting you in jail. Jon Jones, getting drunk and driving, he ain't going nowhere near a jail cell, Jack. He's fine.
You know, it's funny. I tweeted about this jokingly, but it's like only Jon Jones would get house arrest when we're all on house arrest. You know what I mean? Only Jon.
The guy is, at the end of the day, at the end of his career, he's going to be a case study. I find him to be so intriguing, just to be brutally honest. I don't know whether he actually did or didn't do steroids. I lean towards he probably did, but I also lean towards damn near everybody probably has as far as it goes. But just seeing what he's accomplished and knowing what – I guess it does tie into this point a little bit too, because I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, Jon Jones, to Colby Covington's point and everybody in between, has been partying like a wild man since college. And he even told Ariel Helwani in one of those famous interviews after he got back, after all the crazy shit he went through before, he said, you know, listen, I can't guarantee you that I'm never going to have a little toke of the devil's lettuce, that I might not drink again. Like, he's almost embraced this hill that I would like to just see him embrace. When I heard this and I seen all the flack that Jon Jones was taking, my immediate thought was Mike Tyson. Jon Jones was getting raked over the coals. And don't get me wrong, again, the godfather of the network, Mr. Kyle Still, has a very negative outlook on drunk driving, which I understand. It's not a joke at all. But in the grand scheme of things, old Jon driving drunk and talking to homeless people is kind of nothing like Tyson's ever done, except Mike Tyson's revered as a god in our fight game. And Jon Jones kind of gets the short end of the stick that people think he's just a scumbag. And he may very well be, but listen, he ain't never raped nobody or bit nobody's ear off in competition, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, and I'll make the point because, you're friends with Kyle more so than I am, and you do a podcast with him. I'll make the point that I feel like you're alluding to, and I've said this about drunk driving for a long time. I am by no means condoning it. I am also saying that the way that we look at people who are arrested for DUI and DWI versus as many people have probably driven when they shouldn't have, it's a little bit unfair. Once you get busted, it's like you're some sort of leper, and everybody else that's like, I only had I spent many nights when I was much, much younger driving when I shouldn't have. And I'm not proud of it. I'm just saying that's the reality of it. I've never been in some of the positions that Mike Tyson's been in, to further your point. I think that Jon Jones at some point will be looked at like Kobe Bryant, in the sense that when Kobe was playing, the Lakers liked him, but everybody else hated him. And it was like people that were Jordan fans didn't like him. People around the league didn't like him. Celtics fans didn't like him. And then after he retired, I'm talking about even before what happened tragically, after he retired, people started to understand the guy better. And I think that they'll look at Jon Jones and his career and the way he thought about fighting. I think that there's going to be like a 30 for 30 or some sort of documentary that's going to put Jon in proper perspective as to who he really is. And the reason why we don't get a lot of insight into who Jon is because he's smart. He keeps everything close to the vest, which is why he's a step ahead of everybody. He's probably the smartest fighter in the whole game, but he doesn't have to flaunt it because he's like, no. He's like Peyton Manning in the sense that he's like, this is for me. And when I'm done fighting, then I'll let you have it. But I'm not going to let you have it now. I'm not going to let you in on the little secrets, all the tells that I figured out over all these guys. So, yeah, I'm with you in that I think Jon is very fortunate. Not many people are fortunate that a worldwide pandemic broke out. And if Jon doesn't get it or no one in his family gets it, it's never a good thing. But, man, did this take the spotlight off him for a little bit.
Right, exactly. I mean, you could not have asked for a better deterrent to take the light off of you than just a global. Nobody has time to worry about Jon Jones no more. Plus, we're all going to be starving for new news stories. There's always going to be new things happening. And again, now, I guess an important point of this would be Jon did get lucky. Nothing really happened. So we're all just kind of like, oh, Jon Jones was drinking and driving again and he had some weed in the car. Like, of course, who's color me surprised? Now, if he had accidentally ran over one of those homeless people, we'd be having a completely different conversation right now. So right. He does need to be cool. Like, he is playing with fire here. He needs to be very, very careful. He's okay, but he shouldn't keep pulling stunts like this, because if one of them goes wrong, and it has before when he hit the pregnant lady, we could be looking and having a completely different conversation. And that's not cool.
Yeah, no, and listen, when you set out to have a wild night or you end up having a wild night, your intention is not that it's going to be national news, right? He's a famous guy. And I will tell you something I used to do when I was younger, which again is not something I'm proud of, but I thought it was funny. And had a cop been aware of this or present during it, I probably would have been in some trouble. Me and my buddies used to get messed up, and if it was towards the end of the night on the drive home, we would see if there were any ladies of the night, and we would stop and give them these wild scenarios and just say, I'm just asking for a price. How much would something like that cost? I'm like, we all get naked. You watch me and him fight. How much would that cost? Just dumb shit like that. But had a cop saw that, they probably they could probably technically say I was like soliciting or whatever. And I'm like, that's not the point. That's just me being a jerk off. But my point is that when you're Jon Jones and you go out, shoot a gun in the air and have a drink, it's just a wild night in the desert of New Mexico until a cop shows up. Then it's national news. Right. You know what I mean? And if you've had wild nights, you understand that. If you haven't had wild nights, you look at him like, how dare he have Dude, if you've had wild nights, you know what they are. And if you haven't, you can't understand why he would do them. So I'm with you. I think it's going to be a blip on the radar. I think he lucked out. And I think that in the end, he's going to continue with his career and he's going to go be, by all accounts, like you said, the greatest fighter of all time.
Well, and listen, you said at the very end of the question, or will this be the beginning of the end? To be continued. We don't know yet. Like, it very well might be. I hope not. I still think he's one of the greatest fighters that has ever lived, and he's still living and fighting. So I want to see him keep competing.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. If he goes out and does something stupid again, he could wind up in prison before this whole thing is over. So we'll see. Like, if he keeps his cool, this is just another speed bump. But if he does something too stupid too soon, this could be the beginning of the end.
All right, guys, there you have it. Episode 1 of Sparring Sessions Reloaded is in the books. Fred, tell everybody what you got going on, where you can be heard, where you can be followed, the whole Fred Kirby world.
The whole shebang. All right, well, look, it's a quick shebang, man. Listen, this is a new show that I'm having fun on. I will continue to do this. What is this, Thursday? We'll try to drop this bad boy on Thursday evenings, I suppose.
Yeah.
So there's that. Wednesday evenings, I do Keyboard Warriors on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter, Kirby_MMA. That's Kirby with a K. And that's it. Oh, and on Sundays, we got the Not Safe for Work show where I say a bunch of curse words, but basically the same thing, but just with a whole bunch of nasty words in between me and Kyle. So that usually drops on Sunday if Kyle's not being lazy.
In addition to Fred, let's talk about the rest of the network. Big things are happening. A lot of new shows, a lot of new guys on the network. I'll talk about the new guys because you guys already know about the old guys. There's a Euro MMA Maniacs with Marcel and a new guy on the site, Steven. There's the Open Mat, which is sort of the rebooting of Off the Cuff. There's Last One Standing, which is the rebooting of Between the Links. So all new guys on the network, all new great shows. Obviously the stuff we were doing before and may take over Kyle's show, Not Safe for Work. If there's ever fights, I'll be doing recaps again. If there's ever fights, I'll be doing all angles again. If there's ever fights, Max and Marcel will be doing breakdowns again. So a lot of this is contingent upon all of that. Kyle and Keith have dropped an MMA yesterday. So a lot of good things happening at the network. And you can hear about all of them by subscribing to iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts or you listen to your audio podcast or view your video podcast. That's the bell. We'll see you next time. For John Franklin, it's Fred Kirby. Peace.